Hello, everyone.
Yes, we're live. We're live with Robin Hanson. Robin, it's his second time on the podcast. Robin is a great mind of our times. He's been on Lex Friedman a couple of years ago, did 2.5 hours there. That's how I discovered him. Also because of his book, right? The Elephant in the Brain and the Age of M. He's an economist, a futurist, an author, professor as well back then, and just a great thinker. So today we're going to talk about AI and what Robin's has been up to as of late. So Rob, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to.
Hello. I'm an economist. I don't stay in my lane. I try to look for important neglected topics. Several decades ago, I thought AI was a neglected topic in terms of its social implications, so I talked a fair bit about it then before other people. But now everybody's talking about it, so I feel like I don't really have much of a, ability to be heard there much or to have much impact. So I'm doing other things that I think are important and neglected. But if you want to talk about AI, we can talk about AI. You just went quiet. Your mic is.
I'm muted. I'm back.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, what has been going on in your brain in the last 2 years since AI has resurfaced? Has there been some upheaval in there with everything that's happening? What are your thoughts on the fact that this thing might actually chop off a bunch of jobs and replace humans and just cause mayhem?
So I mentally classified the AI as of a few years ago as of the category of AI innovations that we've seen, every decade or two for a long time. That is a promising new innovation. And then I mentally made an intention to watch to see whether it had unusual impact. So obviously I'm around in many people who are making very strong claims about potential impact. I've seen that before, but it doesn't mean they couldn't be wrong right this time. But the question is what to be tracking. What should you be looking for if they were going to have a big impact? And in my mind, the main thing we care about is displacing lots of humans off their jobs. That would be the sign that they had capacities for many other sorts of things, but it's also something people care about directly. So I would be looking for whether there's been a substantial change in automation. So I did this empirical exercise with the co-author of all the US jobs from 1999 to 2019. And it looked at when automation went up or down in that period, whether that correlated with more wages or number of workers, and whether we could predict with other job features which jobs were more or less automated. And it turned out that there was no correlation with more or less wages or workers, and that the predictors of automation hadn't changed in 20 years. That is, which jobs are how automated is predicted by some very simple features of jobs that hadn't changed. And then a few months ago, my co-author confirmed for me that he looked at 5 more years of data up until a few months ago, and that the conclusions were still the same. That is, on average, over this now 25 years, jobs that have more automation do not have more wages or more workers or less, and that they are predicted by the exact same things they were predicted by 25 years ago. So that suggests that within that data set, we are not yet seeing a break from the past. That's the key point. When do we see a break from the past? Like for well over a century, the world economy has been doubling well over, faster than every 20 years. And that can't happen without a lot of change. So the claim isn't that clearly we're having a lot of change in technology. And for the last half century, a lot of that is in computers and algorithms and hardware. So if you see a lot of change in computer algorithms and hardware and a lot of effect, that doesn't mean it's a change from the past, because that's what's been true in the past. So the question is whether there's a change overall from the trends of the past in terms of the impact of computers and AI on the economy. And I'd have to say, not yet. But that's what I'd be looking for. And I do expect it eventually. I expect that eventually there will be this change. And that's what I've read about in the Age of M and other places, that eventually good enough AI would in fact change the whole economy in key ways, but in particular in the growth rate of the economy and in the wages that people get. Those should be affected by big changes in AI.
But in your brain, is it clear that AIs are going to massively slash jobs? Because there's the argument that it's only going to empower humans, right? And humans are going to shift into more managerial, more creative roles. But I think that this narrative is false, because there's AI agents out there. AI agents, they can literally reproduce what we're doing. And that's why we created artificial intelligence, not necessarily to empower us, it's also to replace ourselves, right? Do you believe that in that narrative that it's just going to create new jobs, right, and it's not going to demolish the economy?
So over the last few centuries, automation and machines have, on the whole, complemented human labor, increased its value rather than decreased its value. But that doesn't mean that will happen forever in the future, but it does help you think about what the issue is. So the way I've come to think about it is the following. There are many different kinds of tasks that need to be done, and the tasks complement each other. That is, the better we get at doing any one task, the more valuable it becomes to do all the other tasks we have to do. So there's a complementarity across tasks. Now, each particular task might be done by a human or a machine, and so there's substitution within each task. So now, over the last few centuries, what we've mainly seen is machines swapping in and substituting for humans on a relatively narrow range of tasks, which then made the human workers on the other tasks all the more valuable. So as long as there's, and of course, what we actually did is we added more tasks that we now find worth doing that we never found worth doing before. So the range of tasks is actually flexible. It can actually increase. Right? So that's the history so far. As we've made better machines, they've mostly swapped out for humans on particular tasks. They've added some new tasks that the machines do that nobody did before, and some new tasks that humans do that nobody did before. But for the most part, most of the income is going still to pay the humans to do the stuff they do. And the value of that has gone up because of the machines being better at the tasks they do. But it's not guaranteed that the humans will always benefit from this. Like, standard example is horses. At some point when cars and trucks replaced horses, the horses just lost. Now, horses found other uses to some degree, but there are still fewer horses now than there used to be, roughly, certainly as a percentage of the population. So in the long run, there's no particular guarantee that humans will win out on this. And then a big thing depends on whether humans improve. So then it kind of depends what you count as humans. So like if you think about, say, in the past, there were these eras of humans. There were foragers, there were farmers, there were industrialists. Subsistence farmers have become less valuable in the economy. And that means, what we've wanted is for people to switch from being subsistence farmers to being industrialists, to being urban workers, et cetera. But those who insist on being subsistence farmers, they're worse off. But the question is, are we all human, or are these different kinds of things? So for example, my book, The Age of M, is about a kind of human where it's a brain emulation of a human. So it thinks very much like a human. So if that's a human, well, now humans can be improving with technology. And then there's more of a race in terms of which will improve better on what. If by human you just mean the things that don't improve, well, they have less hope that they're always going to do better because they're not improving, right?
With your horse analogy, I can't help but thinking of us humans as horses, and eventually our population declining as AI sort of takes over and uses us as horse. By the way, there's nothing wrong with that. I just think it's like the evolution, and the aspects here would be humans that would merge with AGI through Neuralink. Do you actually think this is our way out of this?
So merging through Neuralink is not something I'm greatly optimistic about. In the world of jobs today, we do pay a lot of attention to how we package tasks into jobs, and then how we put people doing adjacent jobs near each other. So the ease of communication and interaction and negotiation does matter a lot to the structure of our economy. So what we tend to do is put a package of tasks that can all be done in the same human mind together that would need a lot of coordination and communication, because then you can just talk to yourself much easier. You can talk to other people. So how we arrange the tasks matters there. And then we put people next to each other in the same office, complex, et cetera, when they need a lot of coordination as well, because then they can do that more easily if they're working in the same organization at the same time and place. They can talk to each other. And there's a benefit in that. And so you see what Neuralink is doing is just making it easier for some kinds of tasks to communicate with each other, right? And that'll make it easier to repackage which tasks are done next to which other tasks in a different way. But fundamentally, the benefit you get from repackaging which tasks are done near each other is really, dependent on you actually being good at the task. If you're just really bad at some tasks, there's just no way packaging you together with somebody else who's good at some other tasks is going to help that much. You're just bad. And, you should just be swapped out for something who's better at the task, right? So in a world where there are AIs doing things and humans do things, if humans are the best at something, and AIs are the best at some other things, it might well, a Neuralink where you put those two people together and they can just interact very fluidly and quickly might well make a good bundle for doing those tasks, but it'll have to be because each of the tasks is being done by somebody who's the best at it. And so there'll have to be some tasks that humans are best at that'll make it make sense for you to link them up neurally to an AI that is also best at its task, right? So, in a world where maybe humans are good at tasks, but they somehow are together bad because they can't coordinate or communicate very well, maybe the Neuralink there helps. But I don't think the Neuralink is a fundamental long-term solution.
Yeah, just also, what would be the human usefulness to the Neuralink? Would it just be like a body bag? Would it harvest your energy? Would it leverage some systems in our brain that are very hard to reproduce or AGI? Do you think that
there just has to be something that you're good at that the AI wouldn't be as good at if it did it itself, right? Otherwise, there's no point in it linking to you to have you do your part of the task. There just has to be something that you are actually.
Well, the emotions, right, is certainly one that's hard to reproduce.
I mean, at the moment, we're talking about the future. It's just not obvious that AI can't beat humans at emotions in the near future.
Well, emotions like energy, right? It's a very complex feeling systems, and we evolved in that way to connect socially and to evolve together for our own survivability. So I guess AI could potentially need some of that. What do you think about like the body bag that we would provide to this AI, or skills that would be super useful that these AGIs couldn't develop by themselves? Would there be such a thing?
So again, there's doing things and then there's coordinating to do them together. And often our emotions are ways of coordinating, like inside ourselves, prioritizing which things to do, what we care about more, what we're going to focus more attention on, and then coordinating between groups of people. So for example, in a restaurant, it's very intense and people are working very hard. And so they often insult each other. And insulting each other in a restaurant is part of monitoring each people's emotional, capacity to handle what's going on. And so that's important. Like the interaction of a team at a restaurant, or the team of pilots in a plane, or people producing a movie. There are these jobs contexts in our world where there's a team of people who just really work intensely together, and they're all sort of at the edge of their capacity. And then those people just have to monitor each other's emotions. They have to be able to track who's how close to cracking, basically, who can handle it, who needs a little help because they can't quite handle it. That's a thing that happens in human teams. And so the emotions there are sort of helping you to manage your workflow, the conflicts, etc. But they're because you're actually good at the job that you want to manage these things. If you're no good at the job, there's just no point in throwing emotions on you to help you manage it. It's not going to make you substantially better. So again, if there's humans and AI together in some sort of team, if the human is actually best at something, then you can make a team out of this, and then they may need to communicate emotions back to each other, so to make sure they are coordinating properly. But that'll be on the basis of, in fact, the human is the best at something. If the AI is just best at everything and the humans is just not best at anything, there's just not much point in putting humans on the team. It's, you know, if you think about a basketball team or a football team or some other sporting team, right? They have to do a lot of coordination. They have to watch each other. They have to read each other's emotions. They have to defer to each other, decide who's in charge of things like that. That's still all based on the idea that every player on that field is better for that team than some other person on that team they could put there instead. That's a key assumption for most sporting teams, that you've got a bunch of people you could put on the field, and the people you have on the field, at least at the moment, they're your best people for being there. Every person needs to be carrying their weight in that sense. And if there's somebody who's just not better than anybody else at the team at anything, there's just no point in having them on the team.
Right. And for example, intuition, right? That still tend to view that as a super skill because it's such like low energy cost to get like a major insight that is not obvious. The question is, do you think an AI is capable of doing that if we give it sufficient senses? So vision, audio, and other senses like that. Plus, if we give it sufficient computing power and memory, is it capable of having like similar intuition, or are we like evolutionarily irrelevant next to it?
Overwhelmingly clearly, AI isn't a constant thing. Humans aren't that constant, but AI is much less constant. The AI abilities have been rapidly changing over many decades, and that will continue to happen into the future. So regardless of the relative ability of machines and humans on any particular task at the moment, the main thing we know is that this will be changing into the future. So the more interesting questions are about, in the long run, where can we predict, you know, the roles of humans and AIs to be in the world? At the current moment, you know, everything's up for grabs. Many people are saying the new AIs are great and they can do everything, when other people are trying that and they're having limited success. So, you know, maybe we can't. Maybe, again, people have jumped the gun and they're not quite as far ahead as they thought they were. But look, in the long run, eventually they will get there. And then the question is, what do we do then?
Right. And say that this AI replaces the core of the job market. Would you believe in concepts like UBI and just like practicing what you love doing and not having an economical leverage to it?
So the biggest concern anybody has ever expressed consistently for many centuries about automation is that eventually they would just do all the jobs. And obviously the risk there is that people rely on their wages for income, and they could lose that source of income. Now, we don't know when this might happen, but we do believe it plausibly will eventually happen, that most everybody will lose their ability to earn income because of AI being better at their jobs. So to me, I think the most obvious policy recommendation is just to make available and encourage people to get insurance against this risk. And today the risk is still pretty low chance, so the insurance would be relatively cheap. So this is just the obvious recommendation. Let's create and sell insurance against the risk that robots will take your jobs. And this insurance doesn't have to be individually underwritten in terms of estimating your personal risk. We can just tie it to some global event, like when does the US labor force participation rate, say, fall below 25%? Which would be a pretty clear marker that automation has made a huge impact on jobs. And you could just have a big market asset composed of, you know, stocks and bonds and real estate, et cetera, that you split according to a bet. That is, when the bet goes one way, one side gets it, bet goes the other way, the other side gets it, and it's triggered with this event when all of a sudden lots of jobs are lost. So that's just the obvious recommendation. Now you could say, you know, the government could, in principle, in effect, give you that insurance, but I don't think you should trust them to. They might, but they might not. See, in particular, this new AI economy might not be evenly spread around the world. You might be in some jurisdiction and hoping that your local government will tax the local AI economy to pay you your UBI, and that's your insurance. But what if that economy doesn't exist in your jurisdiction? Then they can't tax it there, and there's no money to pay for your thing. You want insurance, which is based on global assets, global reinsurance and therefore not tied to your jurisdiction. Then you can be insured. So private insurance is just going to be more robust and reliable here than hoping that your government will insure you.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think fields involving physical work will evolve slower. I think there will be people that will rebel against that, and it will be like 100% human economies, right? Like we're seeing some separatist movements right now. We're seeing some, the tariffs and so forth, like recenter everything. Do you think humans are going to protest against robots and AIs doing everything? Do you see a potential upheaval coming if that happens?
Our world is full of divisions, all of which potentially could be the source of a conflict. So there's urban versus rural, there's young versus old, there's male versus female, there's west versus east, right? There's, blue collar versus white collar. So for any one of these distinctions, you could say, can't you imagine a future conflict where the blue and the white collar people fight over stuff? And I'd say, yeah, I can imagine that. But I can imagine that for all these distinctions. But of course, the rate of conflict is relatively low. Most of these potential conflicts don't actually get realized most of the time. So then the question is, well, will there be a AI versus humans conflict? Maybe, but maybe not. So for example, the last biggest analogous thing that happened in the world was the Industrial Revolution, right? And then there were places that were using industry and places that were not using industry. Was there a war against industry versus non-industry? Not really, exactly. In every country, they had both industry and not industry, and then those whole countries fought with other countries, but they didn't necessarily have a conflict over industry versus not. But the general principle is just, our world is full of divisions, any one of which could be the basis of a conflict. And we do sometimes have conflicts, and they do sometimes are based on some divisions, right? All the conflicts you know about in the world are based on some division, right? Israeli versus Iranian at the moment, right? Russian versus Ukrainian. There's conflicts of, all sorts of conflicts in the world. Each one is some division that you could have said, hey, that could have been a conflict. But notice all the other divisions in the world that are not now the basis of a conflict. There's a lot of them.
Right. But there's been an example, for example, Canada that sort of unified since the Trump tariffs, right? Like that has happened, but I can only see a very strong probability of very rich people going in one direction and poor staying in good conditions, but staying with where they are and not having like any chance of ever catching up to the richer side that would probably go and establish a colony on Mars or someplace out there and it evolve at a very, very rapid rate. In which the other people that are left out there wouldn't have the same opportunity. Do you feel that would happen? I don't think the 1% would never, ever be left jobless and would stop competing. I don't think that would happen.
Again, I'm a social scientist. I'm an economist. We've seen a lot of social behavior through history. We have a lot of theories about how they work, and that's going to have to be the basis of my forecasting the futures, our understanding of social science and the patterns in the past. Certainly there have sometimes been conflicts between rich and poor. Sometimes, people have moved away from other people. Sometimes there's a correlation of them and the rich, but honestly, it's just not that strong. Most of the times when people headed off to make new colonies, it wasn't the rich leading the poor. That's not a good description of most colonization efforts in the past. So that makes it unlikely as a plausible scenario in the future, as far as I'm concerned. But you can't say nothing's impossible here.
Right. Well, it was people pursuing wealth for sure, right? They would get some money from the government and they would try to go fetch gold or spices, right?
Right. So often expeditions and colonization efforts, et cetera, had a wide range of people in them. There were leaders, they might have been rich, and there were poor people who had a chance, and there were people who needed to get away because they weren't wanted at home, and the people who were just eager for a chance. There's just a wide range of motives to be involved in a new big effort to go somewhere new.
And if we summon that thing, you like talking about aliens, a Fermi paradox, do you think that's just the end of most civilization? They just summon an AI that's greatly superior to them and off they go?
No, because um, the point is whether a civilization becomes visible from a long way off. And if a civilization, say, is taken over by its AIs, I don't see any particular reason why it would later be less visible. So the lack of visible alien civilization is just not plausibly explained by AI unless AI would make them less visible. But most of the scenarios under which AI would, displace humans are described as the scenarios where the AIs are being aggressive and greedy. But aggressive, greedy AIs would tend to be visible. They would tend to go on to do things that take over larger chunks of the universe and make themselves visible. So I just don't see a connection between a conflict between humans and AIs and the visibility of the civilization.
Well, the smarter it gets, the less visible it wants to be, right? Like,
No,
they're
I'm not.
just
No, not obviously. Actually, so if you're trying to hide and you're willing to spend money to do it, then the richer you are, the more effective you can be. But the question is whether you should bother to try to hide at all. Like most of our cities in our world are not trying to hide, right? You can see them from space. They're pretty easy to see. Most cities are rich and they're spending a lot of money on doing things, but they're just not trying to hide because nobody thinks there's anybody to hide from. Even the potential of foreign nations attacking doesn't really make cities hide. Like cities are in fact one of the main targets of foreign armies, right, when they attack. Therefore, why don't we make our cities hide? Well, it's expensive to make cities hide, and we just don't think it's worth the bother to hide our cities, even though, yeah, if there's a war, they'll be a target.
interesting. Yeah, that's another way to view it. What questions do you ask yourself nowadays? You're into lots of things. You're probably like writing a new book. What important questions are happening in your mind nowadays?
Well, I guess I'll make one point on AI and then go to the other more general subject. I'll say if you just think in the long run, um, evolved creatures like ourselves just have two general habits toward other creatures. One habit is a suspicion and wariness of coexisting rivals, even when they're very similar to you, even your cousin. And the other is an indulgence toward your descendants, even when they're substantially different from you. And that just makes evolutionary sense. Even very similar rivals, they could displace you and you want to fight them and prevent them from displacing you. But your descendants are the thing that makes you last over the long run, and you're going to try to support those even if they are different from you. And honestly, most people expect that if they have a conflict with their descendants, eventually they're going to lose those conflicts. The descendants will win, and that's okay. So the key thing about AI is people have framed AI as a coexisting rival. People have the story. What if you saw, through telescopes, alien starships heading toward Earth, and they'll get here in a century? Wouldn't we want to do something about that? Well, yeah, we would. But that's a coexisting rival. Okay. But the truth of AI is they are not a coexisting rival. They don't actually exist yet. They will exist in the future, presumably. And then when they do, they will be our descendants. They will have arisen from us and they will inherit many of our characteristics. And we expect our descendants to win conflicts with us eventually. That's okay. Now, we may have some bio-squishy descendants and some metal AI descendants, and evolution doesn't really ask you to favor some of your descendants over others. Maybe you'll favor the descendants that seem to have more promise to grow and win out. But in this case, that would be the AIs. And so here, I think it just doesn't make sense to be hostile toward your AI descendants, because the general attitude of evolved creatures should be indulgence and support for their descendants, even when they're substantially different. An analogy I'd give is Earth versus space humans. So forget about AI. Let's just say, look, in the future, some humans will leave Earth. They'll go out into the solar system and the universe, and then there will be space humans, right? And there'll be a lot more space humans than Earth humans because space is much bigger than Earth, right? And now there could be conflicts between space humans and Earth humans. And gee, the Earth humans might lose that conflict. That would be terrible. And then you might say, and we know how to fix that problem now. Let's just not let anybody leave the Earth. If we don't let anybody leave the Earth, there won't be any space humans, and then the Earth humans win. Yay, Earth humans. This is supposed to be silly. That is, we today should see both space humans and Earth humans of the future as our descendants, and we should want to support both of them. If there's going to be conflict, maybe we'll want to try to reduce the conflict and help them avoid that, but we're not going to prevent all space humans from existing in order to make sure the Earth humans don't have any, conflicts with others. That would be stupid. So, right. Because space humans don't exist yet is the key point. We're all Earth humans now, so we shouldn't just favor Earth humans by preventing space humans from existing. We should support all of our descendants, Earth humans and space humans, and then we can think of AI as explorations out into mind space, just like space humans are humans that go out into physical space. AIs are our descendants who go out into mind space. We should support our descendants who go to different places in mind space, as well as our descendants who don't go as far away in mind space.
Right. What if, like us as humans, we still preserve species as well, and we're not super good at it, right? But at least we have the intention to protect and preserve some of them. And I think the best underlying logic is that, we don't have enough science right now to decide on these and to decide if these are good or not. Most of the time we have some science, but don't you think that these AIs would have that sort of empathy, one? And second, maybe they would discover new layers of intelligence, which would have them keep us around other than just eliminating us?
So in the past, our ancestors just didn't live that long and change was slow. So we just never had this experience of many generations overlapping together who were very different. So that's something we're more seeing. Even right today, I'm more of an older person in the world, and I can see younger people are really quite different than me. We've had a lot of cultural change over my lifetime. So I'm a person in a world where we have overlapping generations, which are substantially different from each other. And we're now more seeing the scenario where the younger generations disagree with the older generations. And eventually the younger generations just have more power and capital, and they win conflicts. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that happening across time. I mean, because in the past, I just wouldn't have existed to see this many generations. So having a longer lifetime and faster change means I get to see more change. But now I'm going to see the scenarios where different generations overlap. So that's what's going to happen even more so in the future. Different generations will overlap, and the older generations will see the younger generations having conflicts with them, disagreeing, and typically winning. And I think you should just accept that.
Right. Well, Robin, thanks for all your points today. Good brain benders there. Where can people find out more about you and your company?
I'm a professor at George Mason University, but you can just find out stuff about me by Googling my name, Robin Hanson. I have a blog. I have on Twitter. I write essays. I give interviews. And then next time we talk, maybe we'll talk about culture.
All right. That was Robin